Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, yesterday I was listening to part of a live stream about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and I was listening to some Black nationalists basically criticizing his legacy and downplaying his significance. And what I'll do is I'll post a link to that particular live stream in the description box so that you all could check it out for yourself. But it was a live stream that the brother Psychopathist and Sister Renee did. I usually agree with them on some issues, and on others I respectfully disagree with them. And on this is another example of an area where I disagree with them. And I just wanted to share my thoughts about this because often around the time of Martin Luther King Day, you have people that try to downplay his significance or outright disparage him. For instance, there's this Black YouTuber, one of these YouTube coons by the name of David Carroll. He always does these videos bashing Martin Luther King. In fact, he calls Martin Luther King Martin Luther Coon on a regular basis. So you have these people that disrespect King's legacy. And I'm here today to defend his legacy. While a lot of these people talk about fighting against white supremacy, the brother Martin Luther King was on the front lines in that fight. He faced the police dogs. He faced the police. He faced the batons. He faced the fire hoses. This brother went to jail for his people. This brother ultimately gave his life for his people. Unlike these YouTube personalities that just give their words, who don't even show their faces on YouTube. I think that it is problematic for such people to criticize the legacy of King. His legacy is a legacy of bravery, a legacy of courage. Unlike what many people are suggesting, this brother wasn't fighting for the right to intermarry. That wasn't what the civil rights movement was about. This brother wasn't just fighting for white acceptance and white approval. This brother was fighting for freedom, justice, and equality. This brother was fighting for civil rights and human rights. That's what that brother was fighting for. He was fighting against the degradation and humiliation of his people. And that's exactly what segregation is: humiliation and oppression of Black people. Black people didn't have the right to vote. Black people were forced to go to the worst schools. Black people didn't even have the basic rights to go to any hotel that they want to. They didn't have the right to drink from any water fountain they wanted to. Black people had to sit at the back of the bus in the colored section. And if there were a lot of white people on the bus and they needed the seat, the Black man or Black woman had to get up out of their seat and offer it to a white person. That's what our people went through. Our people couldn't go to any restaurant that they want to like they do today. Our people couldn't go to any movie theater that they wanted to. They couldn't go to any amusement park that they wanted to. Instead, they were subjected to segregation. During those segregation days, Black people couldn't even look white people in the eye. Black people had to go across the street if white people were walking down the street. Black people were lynched on a regular basis. And this brother did everything in his power to fight against that system of oppression, as we all should have, as our ancestors and elders did. So to disrespect this man is to disrespect the struggle of our people. While these YouTube personalities talk about things, this brother actually put in the work. This brother faced the police dogs. This brother faced the police batons. This brother faced the fire hoses. This brother went to jail on multiple occasions for his people. He was beaten for his people. He bled for his people. He marched for his people. And ultimately, this brother gave his life for his people. Unlike these people on here who have the audacity to criticize King, but they don't even have the courage to show their own faces on here. And no disrespect, but how can you criticize the legacy of this man who sacrificed so much for his people when you're not even willing to show your face here on YouTube? If it wasn't for this brother, we wouldn't have a Civil Rights Act. If it wasn't for this brother, we wouldn't have a Voting Rights Act. Without the Voting Rights Act, we wouldn't have black mayors today. We wouldn't have black council, city council people today. We wouldn't have state representatives and state senators. We wouldn't have U.S. representatives and U.S. senators, and we damn sure wouldn't have a black president. And all of this stuff matters because if you can't elect officials, you can't affect policy changes. And the brother King knew this. That's why he fought for this right. Martin Luther King was one of the first people that fought to end the war in Vietnam. When it was unpopular to speak out on that war, that brother spoke out on it. He condemned U.S. imperialism. He condemned U.S. militarism. This man, not only did he speak out on the issues of foreign affairs, this brother spoke out on the issue of poverty in this country. He had a poor people's campaign that he was trying to launch before they took this brother's life. If this brother didn't fight for our civil rights, we would still not have the right to vote. We would still be sitting in the back of the bus. We would still see the no coloreds allowed signs. We would still be drinking from the colored fountain and all that kind of stuff if it wasn't for this brother. And we know that without the civil rights movement, you wouldn't have a significant increase in the black middle class that we see today. We wouldn't have all these black elected officials and black millionaires and billionaires. So we need to respect this brother's legacy. Even if you are a black nationalist or you are a socialist or you have some other political ideology, you have to appreciate the great work that this brother did, because without him and the movement behind him, we wouldn't enjoy these basic human and civil rights that we take for granted today. So I have to respect this brother. And while these people, these separatists and nationalists criticize this brother, for the most part, all these nationalists do is talk. That's what they do. Why they criticize elected officials for not doing enough, and they criticize people like Martin Luther King for not doing enough. My question is, what are they actually doing to fight police brutality besides talking? Where's their black army to defend the black community? It just exists in their mind. It just exists as an idea. It doesn't exist as a reality. Where's their plan to address the problems in education in the black community? Where are their schools if they're so interested in separating from America? What is their real plan to end poverty in the black community and address unemployment in the black community? Where are these black businesses that these people talk about constantly? They talk about the need for black business, but they don't build black business. What have these black nationalists actually done besides talk? Where are their armies to defend black communities? Not only from police brutality, but the inner city violence that plagues our community. These people talk about separation all the time, but in reality, separation is just a fantasy because these people are not going anywhere. They're not separating from America anytime soon. That's just talk that makes them feel good, just like drugs make people feel good. But at the end of the day, the reality remains the same. If you are going to be in this country, which we know that most of us are, we're not going anywhere. We're not going back to Africa anytime soon. We're not setting up some separate nation within America anytime soon. So as long as you're going to be here, you need to fight for equal rights. You need to fight for human rights. You need to fight for freedom and justice and all those things. And if you're going to be a part of that fight, you have to respect the legacy of this brother, Reverend Martin Luther King. They are making the white man, when people criticize King the way some of these people do, they are doing this white man's job for him. That's what they're doing. These right-wing people, they call Martin Luther King Martin Luther Coon as well. They disrespect King. They talk about how he was this and that, he was a communist and et cetera, trying to tear down this brother's legacy. So why should we help them do that? Why should we tear down the legacy of a man that did so much for us? Without this brother, we would still, again, be second-class citizens without basic human rights. And I think that many of us, because of this place of privilege, we don't appreciate what this brother did for us, because we take all these rights that we have for granted. You know, when we sit on a bus and we can sit anywhere we want to, we take that for granted. When we can go to any restaurant we want to, we take that for granted. When we can go to any hotel that we want to, we take that for granted. When we can live in any community that we can afford to, we take it for granted. When we cast our vote, we take it for granted. That's for those of us who even have the wherewithal to vote. You got some of these people that after all this sacrifice for our right to vote, they don't even think that we should vote. My thing is, like, these people want to hold everybody accountable but themselves. When are you going to hold these Black nationalists accountable for what they have accomplished? What have they accomplished in the Black community? I mean, you have some exceptions like the Nation of Islam. They have done things. But most of these people that talk all this Hotep stuff haven't built anything in the community. Nothing. And I'm not talking about the people that did the live stream, so you won't get it twisted. But I'm just raising these points, man. Why are we so quick to tear down this brother's legacy? You know, so quick to talk about how he was about integration and this and that. The brother was about human rights. The brother was about protecting Black dignity and Black respect. This brother, you know, for people that don't even know, this brother talked about reparations. This brother talked about the need to have Black pride. He talked about these things, but people want to ignore all of that. There's a reason why the federal government targeted this brother, and that's because of what he represented. You know, the same government that helped kill Malcolm X is the same government that killed this brother, Martin Luther King. So let's not do the bidding of the white supremacists for them by tearing this brother down, man. So I don't have time right now to go through your comments. You know, right now I have to get to work, but I'll be happy to debate any of you all live on this issue of King's legacy. I mean, it's like, I just hate to hear Black people tear this brother down, talking about his affairs, talking about this and that, talking about these white women and this and that, getting all wrapped up in personal shortcomings of an individual instead of looking at the bigger picture in terms of what this brother accomplished. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings. You know, I may do a follow-up video where I go into more detail about this, but his legacy is undeniable, man. And the accomplishments of the civil rights movement that brother led are measurable accomplishments. You can measure like how many Black elected officials we had under Jim Crow compared to what we have today. You can measure the poverty rate under Jim Crow to what we had to our poverty rate today. You can measure the number of Black people who have received higher education in the Jim Crow era and compare it today. And if you measure those things, if you look at those things, you will see that the accomplishments of the civil rights movement are undeniable. If you look at the legislation that has been passed as a result of this brother's hard work and his sacrifice, you can't help but acknowledge the greatness of the civil rights movement. And, you know, a lot of people take this position where it's like an either or, like either you support Black pride or you support integration. It's not as simple as that. You know, life is far more complex than that. If you are going to live in America, and we know that all of us are going to live here, and nobody's separating anytime soon, then we need to fight for equal rights, and we need to fight for human rights, and we need to demand freedom, justice, and equality while we live here. And that's what King was about. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to y'all. You know, I may do a follow-up video based on whatever is in the comment section, and I may open it up live and just to have a live debate on this thing. You know, I support Black nationalists. I support Pan-Africanism, but I also support civil rights. I also support the legacy of King. You know, while I appreciate King's legacy, I can appreciate the legacy of Brother Malcolm X. While I appreciate somebody like a W.E.B. Du Bois, I can also appreciate a Marcus Garvey. I mean, we got to quit having this narrow-minded thinking in our community. But with that, I want to say peace and blessings. Thank you for tuning in. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.